Hi, everyone. This is John Daly again. I'm here with Bernie Goldberg for another episode of the No BS Zone. Today, we have ourselves a very special guest. You've seen her on all the news networks weighing in on political matters. It's A.B. Stoddard of Real Clear Politics. How are you doing today, A.B.?
Good. How are you?
We're doing great. Thank you. Thank you. So I just want to let everyone know that the first time AB and I met was a few years back in Colorado Springs. It was at a Weekly Standard event. And she was so incredibly nice to me and my wife and very generous with her time. We had a great discussion. And she truly is one of the warmest and smartest people in her profession. So, AB, it's great seeing you again face to face. We very much appreciate you making the time for us today.
It's great to be with you guys, and thank you, John, for the kind words. I'm really glad that I got that chance to meet you. That was before the demise of the Weekly Standard. It was a memorable conference, and I'm really glad to have made the connection and to have kept up with you. I think it was in 2018, so it was about 5 years ago,
That
almost.
sounds about right.
And it's great to be with both of you today.
Thank you. So Bernie's going to start things off with some questions about our commander-in-chief. Are you ready there, Bernie?
All set. Thank you, AB, for joining us. You're adding class to this motley operation. Uh, Everything a president does has political implications. If he coughs, that has political implications. What are the implications of his trip this week to Ukraine?
Well, it's been fascinating to watch the arc of the last year of the invasion, the lead up to the invasion of February 24th, 2022, the Biden administration's response, the response of the American public, yellow and blue flags around the country, and then by the end of the summer into the fall and the deep into the political season, support I noticed among most Americans had very much waned, and we now see, according to latest polls, a definite drop in interest in supporting Ukraine among Republicans, and in fact, more sort of criticism of our support for Ukraine. Joe Biden has never wavered, and you know that his administration knows that this is not a politically popular plank to run on in 2024. He's lost more than half of Republicans in this country, so that's a considerable amount of domestic support. The Ukrainians know this, the Biden administration knows this, but still, on the anniversary of the invasion, he shows up in Kyiv for this well-timed, as you know, strategically timed for the optics, for the anniversary visit that required 20 hours of being on a train. Not just being in a war zone that we are not participating in and we are not protecting, but what he went through to get there really means that he is sending a message of strong support and continued support. It's hard to know what that will look like, Bernie, with what Republicans are feeling and saying and how they plan to oppose any future aid. It's going to be a rocky road, but he is truly explaining to the world, to the West, and of course to Vladimir Putin that he intends to stay at the side of President Zelensky and the Ukrainians, no matter where this goes. And we don't know what victory looks like. We don't know how much more, again, he can supply the Ukrainians, but it is very clear that Joe Biden is making a stand and staying there on this issue, whether it's politically popular for him or not.
Right. For the longest time, I argued publicly, I've written publicly, that there's no way he's going to run for re-election. He knows that he has limitations. And even if he wanted to run, the Democratic Party wouldn't let him run. Apparently, I'm wrong. Oh, does it look? It looks like by every indication that he is going to run. What do you think?
It's just astonishing to me. I have to stop writing about this and I have to stop talking about it because I started in July of 2022. I wrote a piece for Real Clear, then I wrote a piece in September for the Bulwark, then I wrote a piece after the midterm elections for Real Clear saying the surprise, defying history in the midterm elections is great for Biden, but it is no mandate for a second run. And then I wrote a piece last week saying a great State of the Union address, which obviously surprised people and again met or broke the very low expectations, is also no mandate for another run. I mean, to tell the country that he is able to lead us through all sorts of known and unknown problems until January of 2029 is untenable. And he's setting up the country, or at least his party, I believe, for a crisis. And that really doesn't have anything to do with his record. He is unpopular, and that is a consideration, but just purely on the age issue alone, he has just passed Bernie, his halfway point of his first term. People are talking about this if it's going to happen at, at Memorial Day, like, oh, he's going to announce and run for re-election. It's a long time away. And I think that even just, of course, taking into consideration what he's going through in terms of Ukraine, growing tensions with China, all these other challenges, it just seems preposterous to me that he would run again. But yes, I agree with you. They are making all the noises, planting all of the stories in the media about running again. And we see, again and again, party officials stressing in all of these stories that no one is going to challenge Joe Biden for re-election in a primary, and that the party has rallied around him because they feel they have no other choice.
There was a recent Washington Post ABC poll, and one particular statistic just jumped out at me. 62% of the people polled say they believe Biden has accomplished either not very much or little or nothing while president. Little or nothing. Yet he still wants to run. Now I have a theory, which I'll share with you briefly. Politicians don't like to relinquish power. Lifelong politicians really don't want to relinquish power. Given how unpopular he is, even among Democrats, why does he still want to run if it isn't what I just mentioned?
In this case, I actually don't think that is what's, we can conclude, because he's spent his life in government with power, that he wouldn't want to relinquish it. That's probably part of it. But I think I've known Joe Biden, I've covered Joe Biden, spent a lot of time with Joe Biden when I covered the Senate. And I think Joe Biden knows that he's tired, and I think he knows that he's old. I think he can do the job until January of 2025, but I think that he knows that it's probably better for him to go be a grandfather and a father to Hunter Biden, and be a successful one-term president.
Are you suggesting he's not going to run?
No, I think that he knows that, but I think that he is running because it's very clear that the party believes that Kamala Harris cannot win a national election. She can't defeat Donald Trump. And everyone is telling Joe Biden that it would be a debacle if he blessed an open primary, which would be my recommendation, that he would have to endorse her. And of course, it's ridiculous to endorse your vice president. Joe Biden was kicked aside by Barack Obama for Hillary Clinton, and everybody knows it. And voters pick nominees, presidents don't. But there's a lot of tension over what that would mean to Black women, the base of the party. And there's so much fear about her weakness that I believe that's the driving force behind his decision to run again.
In that Real Clear Politics column that you wrote, you mentioned that only 3 post-war presidents have had lower approval numbers than Joe Biden does at this point in his presidency. What happened to those 3, A.B.?
I wish I knew who the first one was, because the
Jimmy
statisticians that I learned
Carter?
that from did not know who it was. Jimmy Carter and Donald Trump were defeated for re-election.
Right.
Joe Biden's polling, I believe, could get back. It was 53% in May of 2021, which is very high, I think, in a polarized nation. It could bounce back if Democrats got a little more excited, if we averted recession, if some things, if they started to feel the infrastructure program in their community, the CHIPS program in their community, the manufacturing jobs that are going to come in clean energy from the Inflation Reduction Act, if they started to feel his accomplishments, I think he would get an increase and a bump in support among Democrats. That could raise his numbers enough. But I think he should be seriously worried about where those numbers are. And the polling that you cite about Americans not knowing what he's done. Way to Win did a poll in 9 battleground states after the midterm elections and found that 78% of voters could not name what the Democrats and Biden have done for them. 78% also of all voters, and then 78% of independent voters. This is a huge problem for Joe Biden. If these voters do not begin to feel, in the midst of high gas prices and other inflation, eggs, everything else, they don't begin to feel the effects of those consequential programs he was able to pass, expensive programs, then I think he's going to, be in a position where he's going to be likely to lose re-election.
Well, what if he runs against Donald Trump?
That's an interesting one. Sometimes the polls show Trump ahead, sometimes they show Biden ahead. We know Americans desperately want to avoid this matchup, this rematch. They don't want Trump or Biden to run, and I absolutely am convinced if Joe Biden stepped aside and one of the governors ran on the Democratic side against old crazy man Trump, they would beat him. I think that Democrats don't think that's true. They think it has to be Biden. But I think if you had a vibrant young leader in touch with the country today against Trump, I think they would do just fine.
One last thing before we go to John. Predictions are hard, especially when they're about the future, as Yogi Berra supposedly said. Do you think it's going to be Biden versus Trump all over again?
I think there's a chance it's Biden versus DeSantis, or it's Biden versus Trump. So there's a very good chance that Trump is the nominee, in which case there is a rematch. But as Joe Biden said, he's a great believer in fate. Something could happen to make him decide not to run. Something could happen to his health, could happen to his family, could happen in this country. And I think a lot could happen on the Republican side on the road to the nomination. I would say it would be DeSantis or Trump. I don't think there's going to be like a dark horse coming from either corner of that pack. But obviously, it very much looks like it could be Biden-Trump or Biden-DeSantis. In the case of Biden-DeSantis, I think that Biden would lose.
John?
Great. Well, I wanted to talk a little bit more about the Republican side going into 2024. Nikki Haley entered the race last week. I think she gave a decent enough campaign speech, but she was very careful, and she's been very careful this far not to criticize the Republican frontrunner Donald Trump, and she doesn't even want to explain really at this point the policy differences that she has with him. Instead, she's been making more of a generational argument, saying in her speech that we're ready to move past the stale ideas and faded names of the past, and we're more than ready for a new generation to lead us into the future. AB, what are your overall thoughts on Haley's campaign rollout and how she's campaigning so far? I know it's still very early.
Well, Republicans don't like to admit this, but there's power in identity politics. I don't like identity politics, but obviously she is coming into the race right now looking like she's going to be the only woman in the Republican primary contest. And she is of Indian American descent, and she's non-white, and she's young. And so she brings a bunch of check boxes to the voter who's focused on electability and believes that you need a box checker. And she's well-spoken and has a good resume and was a governor, which is a considerable experience, in my opinion, for running for president. I think it's significant. She also has a lot of issues. She's kind of from the Republican Party of yore. She seems, John, I agree with you, she's taking great pains to not differentiate herself in any way, but when asked, has been very clear on Ukraine, and that will be a problem for her in the Republican primary, no question. She is is going to have a Trump problem. There's no question. She was with him, not with him, no, she was not with him, then with him, then not with him, then with him, and all over the place. And people are going to see right through that. But I think she's making a great play for vice president. I think that she would be an obvious choice. And maybe she finds some guts. I mean, she's doing weird things like hanging out with extremists like Don Bolduc in New Hampshire, and she's going to CPAC, and she's trying to, come at Ron DeSantis from the right a little bit on his don't say gay, education bills in Florida. Maybe she has some surprises in store. But I think that this idea that she has that she can be a fusion candidate, John, where she flirts with the MAGA base, but is also the old-fashioned Republican. I don't know how successful that she will be. Someone pointed out today, a reporter wrote a piece about questioning whether or not for Semaphore, the new publication, whether or not she could take down the Confederate flag today. Not the fact that she completely avoided this in her announcement speech is so interesting. It was such a big part of her service in South Carolina and her record, but she won't touch the subject of race relations. And so I think it really portends like a rocky road that she has ahead, where I think we could see what her messaging would be in a general election, but it's been a while since the Trump era dawned, and a Republican, to see a Republican get through a Republican primary now and be able to maintain a foundation that would appeal in a general election is going to be very tricky. And so I just don't, I know what she thinks she can pull off. I don't know if she's going to be successful.
Yeah, no, and the person that, of course, everybody is talking about, and we talked about a little bit earlier, is Governor Ron DeSantis. The polls show him as really being the only person, within striking distance of Trump. In most polls, he's still behind Trump by a significant margin. A few show him in the lead, but I think most don't. He hasn't jumped into the race yet, and probably won't for a few months, but Trump is wasting no time hammering him on social media, for which the governor has been largely ignoring the attacks. Do you think DeSantis is playing things correctly at this point by ignoring most of what Trump is saying, or do you see a downside in letting the former president just kind of wail away on him for now?
I think that he's probably making the right call, John, to resist Trump's attempts to get him into the fight. Trump wants him on stage with him. He needs to be someone to beat up on, and he wants to begin to sort of take him down. DeSantis doesn't want to be in the race, as you mentioned, until the legislature session ends, so late spring. And so he doesn't want to be in the fray right now with Trump, the back and forth and the bickering before he's actually launched his campaign. Trump desperately wants to scrap with him now, so he's making attempts to provoke him. And it's probably smart for DeSantis not to do that. But Trump is going to go down low, and it's going to get louder and louder because Trump's desperate for an enemy and to stay on, to kind of get an offense going. And what's interesting to me is that Ron DeSantis is not going to CPAC. That people wonder about whether Ron DeSantis really has what it takes to go all the way. To be, it's not that he doesn't want it, but is he going to survive on the national stage as the heartthrob of the Republican Party that he's been branded now? He's carrying the hopes of so many Republicans who want to move past Trump, who think he's a fighter and he owns the libs and he clashes with the media and it's going to be so great. And we just don't know how whether he'll wilt under the national spotlight. He thinks he doesn't have to talk to mainstream media. Trump does that all the time. Is he going to be a good debater? How's he going to spar with Trump? How's he going to respond? And all of that, with all the money, all the front runner expectations that we've seen so many times with others, it's easy to fail, to fall, and to wilt under the pressure and to not be able to meet those expectations. You never want to be the front runner now. So while I think from here he's being shrewd, I also have my doubts about Ron DeSantis.
Yeah, I've been saying the same thing in some of my writing. I think everybody's kind of the ones that don't want Trump, the Republicans that are ready to move on from Trump. They seem to be putting all their eggs in the DeSantis basket, and he's, he seems to lack the sort of charisma that a lot of Republicans expect these days, and he seems socially awkward a lot of times. But just one more quick question about the GOP primary. I think in 2016, I believe we had 17 candidates, maybe 18. It's hard to remember. A lot of candidates running for the nomination back then. Do you see us getting anywhere close to that number, or are you thinking maybe like a half dozen? Do you have any idea or guess how big of a field that we're going to have here in the coming 2024 primary?
So there are people who believe that they can come in later and just need to, they're kind of holding their fire, and they're kind of trying to raise money and sniff around, and they think maybe they could get in depending on how things go. So I would put Asa Hutchinson, Rick Scott in there. Tim Scott looks like he's going to be a candidate, so that makes 4 people: DeSantis, Trump, Haley, and Scott. Then we have these people who are kind of thinking about it. Looks like Hawley's not going to do it. Of course, Tom Cotton told us a while ago he wasn't going to do it. Now Ted Cruz is not going to do it. So it is not going to be a massive field. And obviously people have been warned. Like, if you don't think that you have what it takes and you can't raise the money, don't get in there and start messing around. Like, just stay out of it. Sununu is on the Sunday shows every single weekend, popular, just reelected governor of New Hampshire, and everyone thinks he's going to run. I have been told that, he might be building up a profile, but he might be waiting. And that's in a way is really smart. If you're in the, and I don't think Chris Christie's going to run anymore, and Larry Hogan's going to run, but of course is not going to be appealing to this primary electorate. So I don't think it's going to be big. And I don't think it's even going to be 8 people. And the thing about the Sununu and then also DeSantis is under all this pressure because he's the chosen one, and everyone's going to tell him, if you miss this moment, you're going to miss it, even though he's 44 and would probably be well served by a second full term as governor. And the thing about both of them is they're probably better positioned if Trump runs and loses and Joe Biden gets another term, because then everyone's going to want a Republican in 2028. If Trump were to win, then the Democrats are going to win in 2028, and it's going to be really bad time for the Republicans. So it's, if we have a country left, I can't even really go there. But my point is that there's the way to build your profile and flirt with this and tease it out, but wait another 4 years is appealing. And so I'm not going to be surprised if Sununu does that. Not going to be surprised I guess I'd be surprised if DeSantis did it. But someone like Asa Hutchinson, he probably is going to have to get in now or never. Will Hurd, he can wait until the Republican Party figures itself out. Chris Christie, he's probably had his moment and it looks like he's not serious. But I don't think it'll be more than 7 or 8. And I think we could be surprised also if things get weird. People might helicopter in. They might be able to raise last minute money because if it looks really chaotic. So I'm not counting that out, like some crazy volatile situation that we can't really envision right now.
Great. I'm going to throw it back to Bernie. He has a question about another Republican who I don't think is going to run for president, but you never know. Bernie?
That's exactly what I was going to say. I don't believe this politician will run for president, even though he's won the Congressional Medal of Honor, a Nobel Prize, and a Pulitzer Prize, and that's George Santos. Have, have you met him?
No.
Do you want
Um,
to meet him?
no. And Bernie, I just want people to stop interviewing him on television.
Well,
Why do people do this?
is he a GOP problem, or is he simply a George Santos problem?
I think he's a problem for Republicans because I think that it's a, I mean, it's a, he's like the poster boy of the House Republican Conference. He's going to be in the news every 4 days, and he's going to get probably in some serious legal trouble. They're likely to lose that seat in the next election, and of course we all know that Kevin McCarthy is just hanging on to him because he has such a slim margin and needs that vote. I think that it's only upside for the Democrats and downside for Republicans, but I don't think we get used to George Santos. I think people get more and more like disgusted and frustrated. And what you'll have is more and more House Republicans, when they're interviewed, saying he's a sociopath and he needs to go home. And that's what you're seeing. They like in the first few days of Congress, they were like, "Oh, I have lunch right now. I got to get out of here." And now, increasingly, they're just going to dump him. The New York delegation is already doing that, and so I think he becomes a real weight for them.
I think you're right. John, we're done,
Oh
right?
no, I agree. I agree. I think I agree with what you with what you two said. That's probably I'm guessing a good place to go ahead and end this episode of the No BS Zone. AB, we want to thank you very much for joining us. I really enjoyed this conversation. I'm sure Bernie did as well.
Much appreciated, AB. Much appreciated.
Thanks to both of you. It was great to be with you.
Absolutely. And everybody, let us know in the comment section what you thought about this week's episode. Let us know if you like us having guests on here from time to time. We definitely enjoy it. Again, thank you very much, everyone. And AB, you have a great day. Bernie, you too.
You too.
Thank you. Bye-bye.